All right. Welcome back, everyone. Today we have a special guest, Jeff Hiatt, otherwise known as the Depreciation Doctor. Jeff, thank you for being here. Welcome. And if you don't mind doing a quick 60-second introduction to who you are and what you do.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Ryan. I really appreciate being on here. It's great to help spread the word about the wonderful world of tax depreciation and how it works for short-term rental property owners. For the last, I guess, close to 30 years now, we've been doing cost segregation studies. So since they first started back in the day in 96, we've been working in this space. And our firm has done about 27,000 studies nationally. We have 6 offices now. Back in the day, when we started, it was an engineer, a CPA, and myself. And now we have about 38 people and 6 offices across the country. And we can do everything from little Airbnbs to skyscraper buildings and everything in between. So
Wow.
that's what we do. And we've been doing it a long time.
Well, sweet. And I know today we'll talk a lot about cost segregation studies. So, as the doctor, would you mind giving us a breakdown of really what that is in simple terms?
So great question. Bottom line is, anytime you've got a property that is held out for rent, call it rent, okay, or lease. In other words, not your primary residence. But anytime you have a property, the IRS is going to put you into a category. Either it's apartments for 27.5-year depreciation, or it's something other than apartments, okay? So that's going to be 39-year. So whether that's retail, office, manufacturing, golf courses, whatever it is 39-year. Short-term rental falls into that category because short-term rental falls into the category as like a hotel.
Mm.
So it becomes what they call, for the short-term rental owner, it becomes an active trade or business. So if I give you the option, Ryan, if I said, hey, Ryan, would you rather take a write-off today or wait 39 years to take the same write-off? What would you prefer? Right. I mean, that's what people say. But oftentimes they'll hear from their CPA, oh my gosh, that guy Hyatt, why are you going to do a cost seg study? You're going to get the same depreciation either way. Whether you do it now or later, you're going to get it anyway. Why would you pay Hyatt to do this study? And the response should be, well, because I don't want to wait 39 years. I don't know if I'll own the property at that time. I don't know if I'll be alive at that time. Don't know what the tax code's going to be. So why not take it now? And so
Mhm.
that's what a cost seg does, is identify the pieces of the short-term rental property that can go into a faster life, namely 5-year, 7-year, or 15-year, and allow you to take that deduction today versus 39 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super interesting. And this is what you got to do in order to take that deduction year one. So you mentioned like pieces and components. What are the things that you're typically seeing in the 5-year schedule, 7-year schedule, 15-year life schedule? Can you talk about those components and those pieces and what you're talking about there?
Sure, absolutely. So the way it works is you start out, you will, I'm going to say, default in 39-year life with a short-term rental. And people go, well, gosh, I don't want to wait that long. I'd rather take it now. So, okay, so what are the things that would fall into that other category, 5, 7, or 15? So imagine this, you're driving to that short-term rental that you own, and then you come to your address and you turn into the property. And the second your tires roll onto your property, you're onto 15-year property. Okay, 15-year stuff. So you're on a driveway, whether it's gravel or whether it's asphalt or something in between. Whatever it is, that driveway, in theory, will have value. Okay, not only the asphalt, but the compacted gravel underneath the asphalt. And you had to drive over a culvert because there's a drainage ditch. That's 15-year property. The drainage ditch is, as is the culvert. And then you're driving and you realize it's just about dusk and the lights are on. Well, the lights in the parking area on the driveway or that line the driveway are 15-year property. Not only the lights, but the conduit that brings the electricity to those lights. And then you've got, well, you're going to walk by the shrubs, you're going to walk by the swimming pool and the patio and the deck. All of anything outside of the physical building to the property line is going to be in a 15-year category. Now, it could be a fence. There might be signs, lights, basketball court, swing set, swimming pool I mentioned. There could be a retaining wall or 2 or 6. Maybe for the short-term rental, they've got a jazzy treehouse thing
Mm,
going on. So whatever is outside of the physical main building is typically going to be in 15-year life. Bonus eligible. Life is good. And then we get inside of the property. Now for short-term rental, because I said 5, 7, and 15, for short-term rental, it's going to be 5. Okay.
mm,
7-year is usually for office space. So
yeah.
7 really won't apply here, but 5-year will. So what do you got on the inside? Well, to understand how it starts without hopefully going to give people too much of an ice cream headache, the scenario is the building itself is going to be 39 years. And how does the IRS define the building? Well, it's defined as the walls, the windows, the doors, the roof, the HVAC, the plumbing for a bathroom, and electrical for lighting. And other than that, it's not 39-year life.
Mm,
Now, a lot of people hear what I just said and they go, that's everything. What are you talking about? Well, you've got kitchen stuff in there. You've got countertops. You've got cabinetry. You've got flooring that is going to be in a 5-year on the inside. You've got carpet. You've got trim around the floor. You've got trim around the windows, window treatments. You're going to have maybe decorative lighting. So you
mm,
have to have one source of light for the space, but maybe there's recessed lights and there's sconces on the wall and there's downlights and there's indirect lighting. So there's a bunch of stuff that would go into 5-year on the inside. Maybe any of the communications, whether it's, your data connections and all, maybe
mhm,
there's an intercom to let people in or out, whatever it is that is above what I said, that is kind of an amenity,
mhm.
then you get to take it over a faster life.
Yeah. And how about, of course, with short-term rentals, all the design, the barbecue grills, the furniture, the bunk beds, where do those get classified?
Okay. So it could be part of cost seg or it might not be. The pro tip is so let's say you bought a place that was vacant.
Mhm.
When you bought it, there was nothing, it wasn't furnished. You didn't buy it as a going short-term rental. You bought it
Right.
as a property and you said, hey, you know what? This is a firehouse in the old downtown and we're going to make it a jazzy attraction place for people to come to that want to stay in an old firehouse.
Yep.
So you spend a bunch of money to make it kind of cooler. Well, the beauty of that is a lot of the stuff that you buy, like the beds and the bookcases and the nightstands and the TVs and the mounting wall hardware and all that stuff, can fall into what they call de minimis. Now, that's, again, technically not part of the cost seg. But when
Mm,
somebody comes in and they spend 50 or 75 or $100,000 fitting out a nice short-term rental, their accountant usually is going to see that number and the accountant will be looking at it and going, Ryan spent 75,000 bucks making, the short-term rental, and he's going to call it 39-year oftentimes,
mhm,
but you don't have to. There's a provision in the tax code called de minimis, and the de minimis provision says if whatever you spend on a given item under $2,500 is immediately expensable. So that means that mattress you paid 800 bucks for, expensable. The bed frame, expensable. The bookcase, the nightstands, the TV, the monitors,
mhm,
as they're called now, anything that you spent for like the FF&E, furniture, fixture, and equipment,
mhm,
is going to be immediately expensable. The beauty of de minimis is twofold. One is it's an immediate expense, yes. Two, second item is because it never is going to show up on your depreciation schedule, and this is ice cream headache time, because it's not going to show up on your depreciation schedule, it's never going to be subject to recapture. So that down
mhm.
the road, if and when you go to sell, that 75 grand is not going to be part of the scenario that gets added back and you have to deal with from a tax perspective. It's just
Right.
gone.
Right. So you brought it up. I was going to ask down the line, but recapture, for someone that's never heard of that, how would you describe that?
Well, so you always have recapture, whether you're going straight line depreciation and you don't do cost seg or you do cost seg. Either way, you're going to have to give back some of the depreciation deductions you've taken.
Mhm,
So with a cost seg in hand, you've taken some of it sooner, some of that
mhm,
depreciation sooner. So depending on when you're going to sell, you may have to give back more of that depreciation. So the way to think of it is, or what we tell people is, if you've bought the property and you're going to, put some money into it and then sell it in a year or two, I'm saying and with capital letters there, and you don't like 1031. So you're
Mhm,
going to own it for a year or two and you don't like 1031. Then I would say cost seg probably doesn't make sense because you're going to do the cost seg, save the tax today, but in a couple of years when you sell, you're going to have to give back that money that you saved today in recapture. But if you said, hey, Jeff, I'm going to buy it, I'm going to own it for a couple of years, and then I'm going to probably, because I have real estate in my DNA and I want to keep upgrading.
mhm,
So I'm going to do a 1031 more than likely. Then I would say, okay, do the cost seg, because the reason you're going to do a 1031 to sell, you're going to do a 1031 when you sell so that you don't have to pay tax on the gain. So you do
mhm.
that 1031. Well, the side benefit of the 1031 is that it allows you not only to defer the tax on the gain, but it also allows you to defer having to deal with that recapture
Yeah,
conversation where you have to give back some of that
mm,
depreciation.
right.
So ultimately, most people in this space that we're talking about are usually going to be stepping up as time progresses.
Mhm,
So they have a $500,000 short-term rental now. A couple years go by and they're loving it. They're seeing the upside and they see how it's going to work. And they decide, you know what, we're going to buy that $2 million property. But to do that, we got to sell this one. So
mhm.
they'll do the 1030.
Yep. And you mentioned so like 1031, you mentioned if they're gonna own only a few years. Any other scenarios where someone should not consider a cost segregation study?
Yes. So there's a couple times that we tell people not to go. Number one, if they're not making money. So
Mm,
like we get referred to people enough that somebody out there in the world has heard about cost seg and how great it is and how somebody can reduce their income taxes. And
right.
everybody goes, well, who would want to do that? I've got a friend. He's got a short-term rental over there at the beach. Well, we get to talking and I can get that person real excited about cost seg. They'll be like, man, let's go. But then we find out, they're not making any money. They're either not making any money on the short-term rental or their day job is hurting for whatever their day job is. So if you're in a really low tax bracket, it would not serve you well to burn up the deductions you're going to get from the cost seg today at a 15 or 20% tax rate.
Mhm,
When if you wait a couple years and you've got a higher tax bracket, then you can use them later. So we would say if you're in a lower tax bracket, why burn up these deductions that could be in your back pocket when you're at a 30, 32, 35, 37% tax bracket versus a low tax
right.
bracket?
And that's a great segue into timing. So, like, figuring out when is the right time to do a cost segregation study. How do you think about timing? What do you advise when people are asking, "When should I get a cost segregation study?"
So there's a couple of things going on there, but again, we'll steer people to the right answer versus the answer I would, or that somebody else might want them to take.
Mhm,
So if they're buying it and it's currently for rent and being used, then it's typically best for them to go ahead and do the cost seg now, because what that allows them to do is get a baseline of everything that they bought. In other words, not only the 5 and the 15-year stuff, but the 39-year stuff, the
mhm,
roof and the windows and the doors and the HVAC. And you say, well, why does that matter? Because those are the things that are not accelerated. Well, if you have a properly completed cost segregation study, then when you replace the original roof and it goes in a dumpster, now my report, unlike some other folks out there, my report is going to allow your buyer, your client, to take a write-off on that first roof when it goes in the dumpster because it had a value. Let's say that original roof had a value of 50 grand for you or whatever the number is, but let's say it's
right.
50 grand for now. So the original roof goes in a dumpster and they have to spend, because of inflation, 75 grand on the new roof. Okay. Well, they spend the 75 grand and their accountant is going to tell them, okay, 75 grand, new roof, 39 years on the depreciation schedule. But the original roof has gone into dumpster. So there's only one roof on the building, but there's two roofs on the depreciation schedule, which is tax inefficient and not required. In other words, the IRS will allow the client to take a write-off on that first roof if and only if they knew what that original value was the day they bought the building. And
Mm,
that's what my report gives them, is that ability to take that write-off in the future as well. So if they know they're buying it and it's in use now, and they
yep.
know they're going to be doing some improvements over time, then do the cost seg right away. As opposed to they've bought the place, it's vacant, it's not ready yet, it's not being used yet, then typically when they get through the renovations, it's going to make sense to do it then. And maybe they'll, miss a little bit of deduction, but they'll get the overall big picture, especially with the new spend. And we still do, in that scenario, we still would be doing the cost seg on the original purchase. So there's often two phases, one phase being the acquisition, the baseline,
Hmm.
and then also the improvements as well to maximize the tax extraction, the tax savings extraction for them.
Right. Just to make sure I'm understanding. So during the original purchase, it makes sense to have your baseline value. And then after your improvements, also getting another cost segregation study done to, account for whatever those improvements were. So you're not being tax inefficient by doubling down on certain items over
Right.
whatever 39, 15, 7 or 5 year span.
You got it. That's right. And
Okay.
a better way for me to say that second part. So you did the baseline. Yes. Okay, great. We got everything nailed down on what you bought. Then when we would be coming in, we would be doing I'll call it a mini seg
Mm,
on the improvements that you did. So that way, yes, you've isolated everything you can out of the original purchase. Now you're going to do a mini seg on that second phase, and you're going to be able to extract as much as possible on that second phase on the improvement.
right. Okay. Awesome. Thanks for explaining that. And then Jeff, I know there's been I guess, an influx in the DIY cost seg or the remote cost segregation study offer, if you will. What do you have to say about that versus an engineered study? Yeah, what's the story behind these DIY or remote cost segregation studies? Are they legit? Do you recommend them? How would you advise someone around those?
Um, so the going off of information from the IRS regarding because there's a lot of chatter, like you're saying, there's a lot of chatter and talk on social media and the internet about, like you said, DIY or remote cost seg or virtual site visit or the latest that seems to be out there, the latest little trick or trend. So they're now calling things non-physical site visits. But what is a non-physical site visit? Well, that would be then a remote site visit or a virtual site visit, which are not allowed by the IRS because the IRS cannot confirm that the site visit was done at 123 Main Street, or was it done at 456 Main Street, or was it done in an AI studio? The IRS doesn't know. They don't care. They don't allow them. So
Mm,
our clients typically don't want to have to worry about an audit that is going to happen in a few years. The problem is some people think, oh, I'm going to press send on my cost seg on my tax return. And if the IRS is going to have a problem with it, they're going to get back to me in 15, 20 minutes and I'll get an audit notice. But it doesn't work that way. It's usually years later that the IRS might come back to somebody and say, hey, you know what? Back in 2021 or 2022, you claimed a short-term rental. What happened? And tell us the details. And where's the contract? And where's the report? And so because it can't be verified, the IRS will disallow those. And so the what you need to have to stand up as a quality cost segregation report is actual site visits completed by qualified professionals. And so we always comply with the rules because we don't want our clients to get whacked a few years from now when not only will they then have to pay the tax, they'll then have to pay the penalties and interest, which have been compounding.
mm,
So that's a bad day. So
right.
our clients don't want to mess with that. So another thing that, as you mentioned, some of the other folks out there that are newer in the market, they'll often say, I'll tell clients all the time, we offer real free audit support. And people will say, well, the guy from the other cost seg company says they've got free audit support. And I'll say, okay, maybe they do. But did you read their engagement letter? And usually buried in the engagement letter, it says they provide free audit support to the field agent. And the field agent is the first person in the door from the IRS. And she's going to say, Ryan, you have a big deduction here. What happened? And you're going to say, oh, we did a cost seg. And she's then going to say, okay, can you send it over? And you'll send it, or your accountant will. And then she's going to say, thank you for sending this. We're going to have the IRS engineers look it over, and they'll get back to you with questions. And there went the free audit support. Now you're going to be on the hook for $300 to $600 an hour, are the numbers that we see in the other engagement letters. So you don't want to have this backdoor problem,
Right.
because they said it was free, but it's only free to the field agent, and the field agent isn't going to ask any questions, because the field agent, that's not their job. It's the IRS engineer's job to drill down and figure out what's going on with the given cost seg. So
Right.
ours is real free audit support.
Okay. So, yeah, it sounds like finding someone, one, to go on site. So these remote visits are not as defensible with the IRS. Two, using a qualified professional.
Right.
And then if for any reason you do need audit support, reading the engagement letter to figure out if you're actually getting that free audit support is what you're recommending.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you got
Okay.
it. And then oftentimes some of the people I see out there have got at one of the last provisions in their contract says they're only going to support anything in the contract for a year. So there's a 12-month from when they send the report to the client. They say they will provide support or backup for a year. Well, like I was saying a bit earlier, typically audits don't occur in the first year. It might be 2 or 3 years from now. So automatically that provision in the other folks' contract negates any future audit support, because they're going to say, well, it's beyond the 12 months. We gave you 12 months free audit support. It says it right there, provision number 11 on our contract. And now you're out of luck. So we don't play that game. Ours is a real free audit support.
Right. Okay. That's good to know. And let's say someone wants to work with you. You said you had 38 or 39 qualified professionals. Like, can you walk us through that process? What does it look like from start to finish to actually, have this process done and done the right way?
So what we do then, we've got like 10 questions that we would ask, and we would, that are basically a listing sheet from your purchase. So let's say there's a listing sheet or an appraisal or both. Bottom line is we get some basic data from the client. We'll work up an estimate of tax benefit before they spend a nickel. So your client is going to know roughly what they're going to save in taxes. We will be conservative on our estimate because we don't want to overblow the number, because if we overblow the number and tell Ryan he's going to save, $100,000 and we only hit 70, not only are you going to be ticked, but your CPA is going to be ticked. But if we say, hey, Ryan, we're probably going to hit 60,000 and we hit 100, then you're going to be pumped. Our estimate is conservative always, because we want to make sure that happens. But so we give you an estimate, you'll look at it and you'll say, that would be nice to save 60 or 70 or 100,000 or whatever the number is. And then you'll make a decision as to go or not to go. And the go decision usually is hit or made positively when you get, for every dollar you spend, you're going to at least get $4 or $5 of tax benefit. Now, we always work on a fixed fee, so we're going to tell you up front what our fee is, but that's going to have a ratio related to the projected tax benefit. So if we say, hey, you're going to save, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000, 100,000, whatever the number is related to our fee, it's going to give you a 4 or 5 to 1 when you've spent more than 300,000 to buy the building, to build the building, or to renovate the building. So if you've spent 300,000 or more, this is probably going to get you over that hurdle of being viable. And then once you're north of that at 600,000 purchase price, or $1 million, or 3 million, or 5 million, the numbers go off the charts, because our fee is not linear to, oh, if it, if I have a $300,000 house versus a 600,000, it's not going to double the fee. If it versus $1 million house, it's not,
Right.
it doesn't work that way. It's just, we've got a baseline that we will tell you up front what that number is going to look like. You're going to know it, and then you can make a decision as to go or no.
Right. Right. And it sounds like, the higher the value of the home, the higher the ROI they're likely going to see given your fee, is not linear, like you said.
Correct. And
So,
there's an expectation going in of more, like the higher price point is going to have more amenities. Maybe it
mm,
does have a nice pool versus the $300,000 house may not have a pool, but the 600,000 has a pool.
right. And then you mentioned CPA a couple times. How does a cost segregation company or a cost seg study interact with the CPA? Like, what does that relationship look like? Who should the property owner hire first? Or is it hiring them both at the same time? Really, what's the dynamic between a cost seg study and a CPA?
So in and of themselves, they can be in their own silos. So since 1996, when we started, we've been getting referrals in from CPAs. And the
Yeah.
reason the CPAs refer to us is because we have a quality product that's defensible, that stands up, free audit support, the whole 9 yards, right? That we've
Hmm.
already talked about. So the CPAs call us up and they say, "Hey, Jeff, got a guy. He bought a short-term rental, seaside property, treehouse, whatever, whatever."
Hmm.
And so we would help them out, go through the numbers, and it makes sense. Now, some of your folks may not have already done the move to a CPA, and maybe they're just doing TurboTax or H&R Block or something like that. Uh, If that's the case, then they probably, once you're into this realm, you probably would be better served to be with some CPA somewhere.
Hmm.
But bottom line is, because you're starting to get into this area that is sometimes called, what I call it is a short-term rental advantage.
Hmm.
Okay. It's an advantage to have a short-term rental. People on the internet and social media talk about it as the short-term rental loophole.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is it's not a loophole. Now, it sounds cool to say that, because then people hearing it go, I want to, there's a scam here somewhere. I want to get one over on the IRS. Well, it's not a scam. It's part of the tax code. So it's not a loophole. It wasn't forgotten and, oh, now people are taking advantage of it. It's part of the tax code. And what I mean by that is it's basically the same regs that apply to a hotel that apply to a short-term rental. And the reason it applies that way is because that short-term rental person is going to be actively involved and actively managing the property somehow, some way. Because you're actively involved in it as a part of your trade and business, that means the deductions created with a cost seg for a short-term rental will first go to wipe out income taxes from the short-term rental property, but excess losses will go against your day job income. So if that
Mm.
person's a doctor, a lawyer, whatever it is they're doing, they're going to have money from their day job. And the beauty of anything in short-term rental, if they're actively involved in it, is going to be that they get to take a deduction, not only against income from the short-term rental, but also from their day job.
Yeah.
That's a big
Yep.
deal. That's like a really big deal.
Yeah.
So that drives a lot of those people, the doctors, the lawyers, the successful tow truck drivers, whoever they are, that have excess dough and are not allowed to take a lot of deductions. That's, I'll say, incentivizing them to go buy these short-term rentals.
Yep. Yep. And then what's a mistake? What is something that you have seen time and time again that people should be looking out for when going through the cost segregation study process, trying to qualify for material participation, bonus depreciation? I know your lane is cost seg studies, but in that process, what's a mistake that people should keep an eye out for so they can avoid it?
Well, sometimes, okay, so I'll give you two, maybe three things to watch out for. Number one, if they are dealing with a CPA, sometimes the CPAs think they're going to say, "Hey, Ryan, you're spending 300 grand on that property. We're going to do this for you. We're going to get you the deductions. You don't need to hire that guy, because you're talking about spending 300 grand, let's say, to fix up the place."
Mhm.
And you would be inclined to go, "Okay, well, thanks, Tom. That's fantastic. That would be great. I appreciate that. That'll save me some money there. I don't have to hire Hyatt. Okay, no problem. So what are you not getting then? Well, he's easily enough going to look at those improvements and go, okay, check, check, carpeting. Oh, you redid the paving. So he's going to get 2 of 40 items that you spent money on. But it's only going to be the easy ones, not the ones that have any kind of complication, which are the bigger numbers, like the HVAC and the plumbing and the electrical and the millwork. So we look at everything. So that's one thing. Don't get sucked into just looking at the improvements, because what did you walk away from then? You walked away from the purchase. So
Mm,
you didn't do, because that accountant isn't qualified to sit there and go, well, that wall is load bearing. That electrical line that goes in from the transformer to the circuit breaker and out to the swimming pool, that should be in a different category. They can't do that. So what we do is not only the original acquisition, but the improvements to extract as much as possible. So
mm,
watch out for that. And then oftentimes they'll hear from an accountant, Ryan, if you do this, cost seg thing, and it's a loophole, watch out for it. You're going to get whacked. You're not going to get whacked. It's part of the tax code. But the accountants sometimes hear that loophole because they hear the same things on social media and the internet about it being a loophole, and they go, oh, but they say, hey, Ryan, if you take all these deductions now, what are you going to do later when you're making even more money and you're not going to have any deductions? What are you going to do then? You're not going to have any write-offs left, which is incorrect, because we're not talking about taking 100% of the entire purchase price. You're not taking it all. You're taking maybe 20% of the depreciable basis. So
mm,
if you paid 1.2 mil for a property, to keep the numbers easy to work with, if you paid 1.2 mil and we sub out 200,000 for land, okay, so we took 200 grand for land, that means you're going to be writing off $1 million
mhm,
of, of 39-year property. And you say, okay, so what? Well, let's say the cost seg is going to land somewhere between 15 and 25%. And you go, okay, let's say it's 20% for now. So that means of that million, you're going to have 200 grand that's going to go into 5 and 15-year life, bonus eligible. You get to take that 200 grand deduction immediately. That's a smoking deal, right? You're going to save yourself maybe 70 grand of income tax.
mhm,
Okay, great. But your accountant just told you, hey, look out, you're not going to have any deductions later. Well, how much did you take early? 20%, 200 grand. So how much do you still have in play later?
mm,
80%, 800 grand. So you still are going to be depreciating 800 grand over 39 years.
mhm,
Sometimes as a red flag or mud in the water, the CPA will throw that out, and then people go, well, yeah, I won't have any write-offs later. Now what am I going to do? But that's just somebody the CPA that just hasn't followed up on the warning track. The
right,
third
okay,
The third line that you want to watch out for is just thinking this is for a new purchase, because many times accountants will say, Ryan, you bought that property 5, 6 years ago. You can only amend going back 3 years. You're not going to be able to do this. Those people on the internet don't know what they're talking about. You can't amend that far back. Well, you don't have to amend. There's a provision in the tax code that says you can step back in time, technically, and I'm saying this in case somebody sends this recording to their accountant. Technically, you can go back to 1987 when the tax laws first changed. Now,
mm,
typically, you won't go back that far. So typically, the window of opportunity for cost seg retroactive is 15 years. So you can step back and say, wait a minute, hey, IRS, I took 100 grand of depreciation in the last 5 years since I bought this place. I should have been taking 350 grand. I'm going to catch up the difference now, and I don't have to amend my tax return. So we
mm,
always do those forms. It's called a change in accounting method form. We always do them for the client so that there's no audit risk there. But always remember, for your clients, maybe you've got that you're doing property management for, you know somebody is chomping at the bit to buy the next property,
Mhm.
but they're just a little short on cash. And they would really love to put in a bigger offer, but they just don't have it. They've tried everything they can. Well, you know they own 4 other properties because you manage them for them. So what if you said to them, "Hey, George, you've got those other 4 properties. Who did your cost seg?" And that George is going to say, "What's that?" And you're going to say, "Well, there's a way that you could save money from sending it to Washington, D.C. in tax payments. You could save money and use that tax benefit, that tax impact savings to go buy this other property you really want to buy." So
Mm.
that's that's how you can stack your portfolio as a real estate investor, is to use the tax benefits to get to the next property, build your portfolio, get to the next property. If you need to, do a 1031 to get out of the one that's now 300 grand, but you're buying in the $2 million range now. So get rid of that
Mhm.
small one that's not as profitable and then roll that dough into the next deal.
Boom. That's a
Boom.
lot of juice.
I threw a lot out. I hopefully
Well,
did.
I think, yeah, I like you're saying ice cream, melt brain, whatever you say, but, that's a lot of great information. I think that's a good place to leave off. I'll give one more final question. Is there anything else you want people to be thinking about as they're saying, "Okay, I'm ready to start qualifying for this tax advantage. I'm ready to do the cost segregation study." Anything else you want them to be thinking about as they're starting to pursue the cost segregation study process?
No, I mean, we offer complimentary estimates of tax benefit, so you would know upfront, roughly what the tax benefit is going to be on a conservative side, and then what the fee is going to be. So use that QR code, folks, and that will enable you to jump and get right to our questionnaire, a little property questionnaire, and that will help us give you as accurate as possible a an estimate of tax benefit as well as the fixed fee quote. So use that QR code. Give me a call if you'd like. My number will be on the QR code thing too. So thank you very much for your time.
Awesome. Jeff, the Depreciation Doctor, appreciate your time.